The world in shock. Nostradamus predicted 2025's most unbelievable events. What if the future isn't as unpredictable as we think? Imagine flipping through a dusty book written nearly 500 years ago and seeing the events of 2025 staring back at you. War, fire, floods, the fall of kings, a fragile pope, a world at the edge. It sounds like a blockbuster movie plot, but what if it's not fiction? Nostradamus, the mysterious French astrologer and physician of the 16th century, claimed to see centuries ahead. His cryptic verses have fascinated and haunted readers for generations, with eerie echoes found in world-shaking events from the rise of Hitler to the moon landing, and maybe even the climate chaos and global unrest we're living through right now. As the world teeters on the edge of uncertainty in 2025, his words are making headlines again. Were they just poetic riddles or chilling truths encoded in time? Let's unravel the prophecies that seem to speak directly to our moment and ask the deeper question: what do we do with a warning that might have come centuries too soon? Number 1. Nostradamus's past predictions that came true. Nostradamus has long captured the world's imagination, not merely as a figure of mystery, but as a man whose words continue to echo through centuries. While some might brush his prophecies aside as poetic riddles or clever guesses, history has a way of circling back to the quatrains he left behind, some of which seem almost too accurate to ignore. In his lifetime, Nostradamus penned 942 cryptic verses, known as quatrains, many of which appear to mirror monumental events from both past and modern times. For example, he is credited with foreseeing the French Revolution, 2 world wars, and even the tragic deaths of major historical figures like Napoleon, Hitler, and Princess Diana. One of his most striking forecasts spoke of mankind's giant leap, the moon landing by Apollo, an event that redefined human potential and unity, if only for a brief moment. His method wasn't just intuition. He claimed to draw insight from the stars, practicing a form of astrology grounded in classical tradition and spiritual texts. This blend of celestial observation and deep philosophical reading formed a unique lens through which he viewed the world's unfolding destiny. A haunting example of his accuracy comes from the court of Henry II of France. Feeling the weight of age and curiosity about his fate, the emperor summoned Nostradamus for answers. The prophet warned of a fatal injury to the head during a jousting match, a detail so specific it seemed absurd. But not long after, Henry took a lance to the face in a tournament and died, fulfilling the grim vision. The fact that this prediction was published a year before the accident lends a chilling credibility to his words. The thread continues with his description of a powerful leader who would rise from modest beginnings, achieve great dominance, and suffer exile before a final fall. An arc that fits Napoleon Bonaparte with eerie precision. And then there's the devastating Great Fire of London in 1666. Nostradamus described a mysterious burning in London that, when interpreted, closely aligns with the actual disaster that reduced the city to ashes and forever altered its architecture and psyche. These moments, when seen not just as events, but as deeply emotional turning points for humanity, invite us to reflect on the fragility of empires, the unpredictability of life, and how warnings, when ignored, often become lessons etched in pain. As time rolled on, Nostradamus didn't fade into historical trivia. He was credited with seeing glimpses of the modern age, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the heartbreaking Challenger explosion, and even the assassination of John F. Kennedy. These are not just events in a history book. They were seismic moments that left the world breathless. Whether one believes Nostradamus was divinely inspired or simply a master of poetic ambiguity, his impact remains undeniable. His words still stir debate, curiosity, and in some cases even fear. That's the power of a message that lingers, not because of clarity, but because of its ability to make us question, connect, and look inward. The question isn't always whether the prophecy came true, but whether we listened closely enough to learn something from it. Back in 1554, Nostradamus went all in on his prophetic mission. He envisioned 10 volumes, each with 100 poetic quatrains, forming a grand tapestry of potential futures. By 1555, his work was published, a book of puzzles, mysteries, and spiritual warnings. To guard against persecution from religious authorities and critics, he cleverly encoded his verses, using a blend of languages like Greek, Latin, and dialects from southern France. This intentional vagueness protected him, but also ensured that his work would remain open to interpretation across generations. Despite skepticism from some who saw him as mad or even evil, his popularity surged, especially among elites. One notable admirer was Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France, who, after reading a troubling poem in his almanac, invited him to court to read her future. Such moments of royal intrigue show us just how seriously his visions were taken, even by the powerful. Now, centuries later, scholars suggest that over half of Nostradamus's predictions may have come to pass, and if he truly saw as far as the year 7000, his vision of the Gobi Desert transforming into a sea by the year 3979 suggests a future we can't yet comprehend, but perhaps should begin preparing for. In a world today filled with uncertainty, climate change, war, and the rapid evolution of technology, maybe the deeper message here isn't about predicting the future with pinpoint accuracy, but about paying attention to patterns, both cosmic and human. The past whispers warnings, and whether they come from a French seer or our own inner intuition, they deserve a moment of silence, reflection. We don't need to be prophets to be wise. We only need to listen better, live more mindfully, and care for one another before the next great fire burns away what we took for granted. Number 2. Nostradamus's predictions for 2025. 1. Climate change and natural disasters. As we find ourselves navigating through the rapidly unfolding events of 2025, the growing impact of climate change is no longer a distant concern, but a lived reality, touching millions across the globe. Among the chilling predictions of Nostradamus, one warning has begun to resonate with particular clarity: the rise of extreme weather and environmental upheaval. The year began with a historic milestone. January 2025 was declared the warmest January ever recorded, with global surface temperatures averaging 1.75 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. This isn't just a number on a graph. It's a red flag that 18 of the last 19 months have breached the critical 1.5 degrees Celsius limit set by the Paris Agreement, a boundary that was meant to prevent catastrophic ecological tipping points. As this heat builds, it doesn't just stay in the atmosphere. It fans the flames of wildfires, dries up rivers, and sends shock waves through ecosystems and human systems alike. In South Korea, this took a heartbreaking turn in March, when the nation was gripped by the most destructive wildfires in its history. In North Gyeongsang province, intense fires claimed at least 27 lives, displaced tens of thousands, and destroyed entire communities. Drought, heat, and unforgiving winds came together in a lethal dance, conditions clearly intensified by the changing climate. But these disasters are not isolated. They are part of a global pattern, an accelerating unraveling of the delicate balance that sustains life. The rapid melting of glaciers, highlighted in alarming detail by the United Nations, now threatens the water and food supply of up to 2 billion people. Glaciers that have fed rivers and farms for generations are disappearing before our eyes, leaving behind dry valleys and uncertain futures. In mountainous regions, especially in parts of Asia and South America, this shift isn't abstract. It directly undermines agriculture, drinking water, and entire ways of life. At the same time, far out in the seas, Australia's Ningaloo and Great Barrier Reefs are suffering through yet another mass coral bleaching event. As marine heat waves drive ocean temperatures to critical highs, the once colorful reefs are turning ghostly white, with up to 90% of coral affected in some regions. This isn't just an environmental loss, it's an economic and cultural blow, affecting fisheries, tourism, and coastal communities that have depended on the reefs for generations. All of this is being compounded by a more turbulent water cycle. As the planet heats up, the atmosphere traps more moisture, creating a world where droughts stretch longer and rainstorms fall harder. It's a paradox where some regions face parched fields and cracked earth, while others are flooded by relentless downpours. The pattern of extremes is unmistakable: long, dry spells, followed by sudden, overwhelming rainfall. And it's disrupting both natural rhythms and humans. Farmers can't predict the seasons like they once did, and cities are struggling to manage infrastructure designed for a different era. Nostradamus may have written his verses centuries ago, but when we look around today, the chaos he foresaw in nature seems eerily present. Whether we see his work as prophecy or coincidence, the message is the same. We must prepare ourselves and act with urgency. In our modern lives, it's easy to feel powerless in the face of such vast changes. But mindfulness teaches us that every small action matters. Choosing to reduce waste, conserve water, support sustainable practices, and stay informed can ripple outward. And beyond the practical, we must also look inward. Let this moment be a call not just for environmental action, but for compassion and connection with the earth and with one another. In Buddhism, we are reminded that suffering comes not only from what happens outside us, but also from how we respond within. So while the world around us heats up and becomes more uncertain, may we cool the fires of fear with wisdom and walk gently together on this shared journey through a changing world. 2. Pope Francis and the prophecy of the Pontiff. In his famous book, Les Prophéties, written in 1555, Nostradamus made hundreds of predictions, and one of them, many believe, points directly to something happening right now: the fragile health of Pope Francis, and what that might mean for the future of the Catholic Church. His words hinted at a time of upheaval, a battle on the seas, royal disruption, and something more intimate: a great change within the Vatican itself. As we look around at today's world, we can't help but ask, is this the moment he foresaw? Now let's focus on Pope Francis, the 266th leader of the Roman Catholic Church, known for his humility, compassion, and efforts to bring the Church closer to the people. On February 14, 2025, at the age of 88, Pope Francis was rushed to Gemelli Hospital in Rome. What started as bronchitis quickly turned into double pneumonia, a life-threatening illness for anyone, but especially for someone with a history of lung surgery. For 38 days he remained in the hospital, enduring some truly terrifying moments. One so severe on February 28th, the doctors even considered halting treatment. But Pope Francis, true to his character, fought with resilience and grace, and on March 23rd he was released. Now resting in Casa Santa Marta, his Vatican residence, he's been advised to take a 2-month break, focusing on full recovery, minimal activity, and restoring strength. Yet while he rests, the world watches, some with concern, others with curiosity, and many recalling the old prophecies that seem to mirror today's events. This brings us back to Nostradamus. Among his puzzling quatrains, one stands out. Through the death of a very old pontiff, a Roman of good age will be elected. Of him it will be said that he weakens his seat, but long will he sit in biting activity. It's a poetic, almost haunting image. Could this very old pontiff be Pope Francis? Is the Roman of good age his future successor, someone younger and perhaps more dynamic? The prophecy's next line adds intrigue. The new pope is said to weaken his seat, possibly hinting at internal struggles within the church or a shift in its influence. But here's a gentle reminder. While these verses can spark reflection and discussion, they are ultimately symbolic, open to many interpretations. Prophecies are like mirrors. They reflect back what we choose to see. And right now, what we do know for sure is that Pope Francis is still here, still guiding, still praying. The Church remains steady, even in moments of uncertainty. The Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment." So, perhaps the real wisdom lies not in guessing what may come, but in how we respond to what's happening now. And that brings us to you. What do you think? Do you believe in prophecies as a map of what's to come? Or do you see them as stories, tools to help us look deeper within ourselves and our world? Can we find peace in uncertainty, or are we always searching for answers, even in ancient texts? As you sit with these thoughts, remember, true understanding often comes not from knowing everything, but from asking the right questions. As the Dhammapada teaches us, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Let that be our compass, even as we explore the mysteries of the past. 3. World War III predictions. In a world already trembling from uncertainty, Nostradamus's predictions for 2025 have reignited a deep collective anxiety, especially among those who've witnessed decades of global tension. According to interpretations of his mysterious verses, Nostradamus foresaw a major conflict arising nearly 79 years after the end of World War II, with China at the center of a potential global confrontation. This chilling vision becomes even more unsettling when we look at modern geopolitical dynamics, the rising tensions between China and Taiwan, military maneuvers in the South China Sea, and the increasing presence of NATO forces in response. Some see these as eerie reflections of his centuries-old writings. He reportedly mentioned naval clashes and a red adversary gripped by fear. Many link this to China, drawing parallels to the nation's flag and growing military dominance. It's moments like these when ancient prophecies and modern headlines start to blur, making us wonder whether history is simply repeating itself with a new cast of characters. As we watch the shifting alliances and mounting pressures on the global stage, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, as though we're watching a slow build-up to something massive and irreversible. Nostradamus's cryptic lines have often been interpreted through the lens of biblical prophecy as well, painting a landscape of looming wars, natural disasters, and famine, echoing Apostle Paul's warnings and gospel revelations. But while these messages may seem terrifying, they also serve as a wake-up call. Rather than giving in to fear, we can choose to become more aware, more compassionate, and more responsible as global citizens. Understanding these prophecies, not as certainties, but as cautionary tales, allows us to reflect on our actions and the direction of our societies. And as much as people are drawn to the drama of world-ending scenarios, it's essential to ask, how are we living today? Are we sowing peace, or are we feeding conflict with our choices and beliefs? Adding more complexity to Nostradamus's foresight is his haunting prediction of 3 antichrists, figures of immense influence and darkness. He is believed to have already identified 2 in history, Napoleon and Hitler. The idea that a third is yet to come stirs endless speculation. Public figures, from political leaders like Donald Trump and Joe Biden to royalty like King Charles, are often thrown into this guessing game, though such speculation usually says more about our fears than about facts. The identity of this so-called final Antichrist remains unknown, but the real concern isn't the person, it's the spirit they represent: division, deception, power without compassion. When we fixate too much on who the Antichrist might be, we risk ignoring the rise of hatred and division already creeping into our daily lives. The spirit of such evil doesn't always come with grand announcements. It can be found in how we treat one another, how we allow fear to dictate our choices, and how we respond to suffering, whether near or far. In the grand narrative Nostradamus seemed to outline, we're somewhere before the final chapter, a time when good and evil begin to visibly take sides. After a prophesied 1,000-year reign of peace under Christ, a final rebellion led by Satan is expected, only to be utterly defeated, symbolically cast into the lake of fire. Whether one takes these prophecies literally or metaphorically, they urge us to examine our values. Are we contributing to peace or to chaos? Are we fostering understanding or deepening division? In today's world, shaped by misinformation, fear, and constant noise, it is more important than ever to live with clarity and compassion. Nostradamus may have written his visions hundreds of years ago, but their emotional pull endures because they speak to something timeless: the human struggle between destruction and hope. So while we look at the signs and wonder what 2025 may bring, let's not forget that the future is shaped not just by the stars or seers, but by us, by how we choose to live, care, and act right now. 4. British royal family turmoil. When King Charles III was diagnosed with cancer in February 2024, concern swept across the United Kingdom and beyond. At 75 years old, he had already undergone treatment for an enlarged prostate, and more recently, reports, though not officially confirmed, have suggested a brief hospitalization in March 2025 due to side effects from ongoing treatment. This has raised an important question. Is the king's health more serious than the palace has disclosed? And could this situation lead to a change in the monarchy sooner than expected? Amid growing speculation, some have turned to a rather unusual source for answers: the centuries-old prophecies of Nostradamus, the 16th century French seer whose cryptic verses are often revived during times of crisis or transition. One particular passage has drawn renewed attention, as it appears to reference the downfall of a monarch dubbed the King of the Isles. Could this be a veiled reference to King Charles? British author Mario Reading, who spent years studying Nostradamus's texts, once suggested that the prophecy might point to King Charles abdicating, not necessarily due to illness alone, but possibly due to lingering public discontent. Reading even went a step further, proposing a shocking twist, that the next monarch might not be the expected heir. Could Prince Harry, rather than Prince William, somehow ascend the throne? This interpretation certainly raises eyebrows. Under the current royal succession laws, William, Charles's eldest son, is first in line to the throne, followed by his children. Harry, having stepped back from royal duties and relocated to the US with his wife Meghan Markle, is a distant second son, often viewed as an outsider to the crown. Could a major disruption in tradition really put him on the throne? Or is this simply an overreach by those reading too deeply into poetic language? That leads us to a more fundamental question. How should we interpret Nostradamus's writings? Are they true predictions of the future, or literary expressions meant to capture the chaos and uncertainty of historical change? His verses are famously ambiguous, and much of their meaning depends on who's reading them and when. What seems clear is that King Charles's health has introduced an air of uncertainty to the monarchy. Whether temporary or long-term, his reduced role naturally sparks speculation, not just about his personal future, but about the institution he represents. In that space of uncertainty, it's perhaps no surprise that myths, prophecies, and alternative narratives begin to surface. But it's important to approach such claims with a critical lens. While ancient prophecies may inspire reflection or intrigue, they are not factual predictions and should be understood within the historical and literary context in which they were written. Still, the questions remain. Could tradition be upended? Could family dynamics and public perception reshape the monarchy in ways we don't expect? These may not be answers found in the stars or old texts, but in the unfolding reality of a modern royal family facing timeless pressures. As observers, perhaps the true takeaway is not whether Nostradamus was right, but what these moments of uncertainty reveal about leadership, legacy, and the ever-evolving nature of power. Advice: stay grounded in an unpredictable world. In times when the world seems to tremble under the weight of uncertainty, whether from troubling headlines, climate instability, or the unpredictable turns of life, it's natural for the heart to feel unsettled. Nostradamus's prophecies, with their mysterious symbols and grim forecasts, continue to capture the imagination, sparking either fear or fascination. But perhaps the deeper wisdom isn't about whether these predictions will unfold exactly as written, but about how we, as individuals, choose to respond in the face of such unpredictability. The teachings of Buddhism often remind us that clinging to fear or craving for control only deepens our suffering. As the Buddha wisely said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment." This is not just poetic advice. It's a roadmap for staying grounded when everything around us feels like it's spinning. Throughout history, people have faced wars, natural disasters, social upheaval, and uncertainty. Yet the thread that has held communities together has always been how they chose to respond, with wisdom, with kindness, and with the willingness to act instead of retreating into fear. We are not helpless pawns on a cosmic chessboard. We are agents of change. Our small daily choices, how we speak to each other, how we care for our environment, how we spend our time, carry enormous ripple effects. Prophecies, whether symbolic or literal, do not need to paralyze us. Instead, they can awaken us to live more intentionally, to sharpen our awareness, and to choose compassion when anger or apathy might seem easier. This shift in perspective turns fear into fuel for mindful living. When we look around and see the climate changing, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. But even small, conscious habits, recycling, reducing consumption, choosing products with less harm, are powerful acts of love for the earth. When the world feels divided by anger or misunderstanding, we must become bridges. The Dharma encourages us to listen deeply, not just to words, but to the suffering beneath them. It tells us that empathy can dissolve walls, and that true strength lies not in being louder, but in being more present. This teaching is echoed by the Dalai Lama, who once said, "Be kind whenever possible. It is always possible." In times when institutions and systems feel unstable or untrustworthy, it becomes even more vital to anchor ourselves in community and in ethical action. Doing the right thing might not be the most convenient path, but it's the one that offers real inner peace. It is in such moments that we realize morality is not a luxury. It's a necessity for survival with dignity. Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic thinker whose words transcend time, reminds us, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This insight aligns perfectly with Buddhist teachings on mental discipline and awareness. We might not be able to control every external situation, but we can choose how we meet it. The breath, the present moment, the clarity of seeing things as they are. These are our anchors. Rather than asking, "What will the future bring?" perhaps the more powerful inquiry is, "What am I bringing into the future through my thoughts, words, and actions today?" When we shift our focus from prediction to presence, from fear to responsibility, we reclaim our power. In a world that often demands urgency, it's easy to forget that slowing down and tuning in is not weakness, it's wisdom. Paying attention doesn't just mean staying informed. It means listening to that quiet voice within that nudges us toward what is right, even when it's uncomfortable. Don't let the noise of fear drown out your inner truth. Don't let uncertainty shrink your heart. Every moment of gentleness, every deliberate choice to be kind, to care, to protect, these are not small things. They are the seeds of the world we wish to see. As Thich Nhat Hanh beautifully expressed, "Because you are alive, everything is possible." In each small act, there is a chance to influence the larger whole. And so, the real challenge is not about deciphering dark prophecies or preparing for worst-case scenarios. The true work is in becoming someone who stays upright in the storm, who chooses compassion over chaos, and who understands that their presence can be a refuge for themselves and for others. With every sunrise, we get to decide what kind of world we want to build through our choices, our courage, and our care. If the question on our minds is, "Who am I becoming in these uncertain times?" then let the answer be rooted in awareness, in kindness, and in the steady strength of living by our values. In doing so, we don't just survive uncertainty, we transform it. And so, as we reflect on the prophecies of Nostradamus and the echoes they seem to cast into our modern world, perhaps the real message is not one of fear, but of awareness. In times of uncertainty, we're reminded that while we can't always predict the future, we can shape it. Through how we live, how we treat each other, and how we respond to the world around us. Whether his visions were divine insight or poetic interpretation, the deeper wisdom lies in how we listen, how we learn, and how we choose to act today. If this journey has given you something to think about, inspired reflection, or sparked curiosity, we invite you to walk with us further. Please like, share, and subscribe to The Journey of Wisdom, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Until next time, may your path be grounded in clarity, compassion, and calm. Stay mindful and take good care.